All right, hello YouTube. Originally, this was supposed to be a live stream, but apparently I don't meet the requirements now to do that on mobile, and I don't have the capacity right now to set this up on my computer. So we're going to kind of treat this as a little bit of a live stream type thing. So I was supposed to be teaching at my school today, but some things happened and it canceled, and I only did about an hour. So I'm thinking very musically right now, and I was like, you know what? I think I kind of know what I want to do with this channel. So what I'm gonna start doing is what I'm calling starting a series called Songwriter Stories, and basically what it's gonna be about is kind of just all things songwriting ish. So, for example, this first presentation is going to be about fostering creativity. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to replicate a small series that I did on my Snapchat a little bit ago, where I'm kind of going through my creative process, my lightning in a bottle type moment, and kind of working my way up to kind of just where I'm at with the song currently. So this happened a little bit ago, and I'm basically going to do like a shot for shot sort of remake about it. I wish I know that Snapchat would like keep it because then I would just translate it over to here. But at the same time, I think that's kind of what I'm going to do with this channel. I think I'm going to kind of make this like the main thing. And then occasionally, whenever there's a YouTube musician or even just regular musicians in the industry whose interviews that I hear or say something and kind of just what my response is, I'm going to kind of do that as well. But I think this is kind of what the channel is going to go towards. And I'm probably going to make an Instagram so I can do more bite-sized shorts of things like this, and also eventually change the name of this channel to Songwriter Stories if it's not already taken. If it is, then I'll come up with some variation thereof. But all that aside, what I want to do today is kind of talk about what I did on my Snapchat, right? So I've been writing some songs recently, and the creative state has changed for me. So now I kind of want to document how it is to help other musicians kind of get into it. So songwriting is art form in itself, right? If you're a musician and you just started, or whatever your musicianship, your skill set, or how long you've been playing an instrument, it is a different skill altogether. So it kind of requires some poetry skills, some English in an academic sense. So whatever language you are, like the academic equivalent of comprehension of your language, and obviously your compositional skills with your instrument as well. It's a blending of art forms. So there are two little tips that I'll kind of start off with to preload us before we start getting into the recreation aspect of what I'm doing here. So the two tips are, if you're not actively already in the process of writing something and it's just starting to come to you, do an activity that doesn't require a lot of mental thought. So the two things I usually do is I shower or I go for a walk. Both of those things don't really require a lot of mental effort. I can just go and I can do them. And then I can do the second tip, which is take that creativity as far as I possibly can. Now, that has some caveats in itself. You can't really focus on keeping it initially. That's how you lose that flow state. And that's basically what we're talking about here. When you're in a writing mode, you are in a flow state. And you can treat that like athletes do, or how any other, if you're just composing something and you're writing something, it's that same state, right? It's a little bit different because we have to be cognizant. We have to be aware of what we're saying because it has to make sense, right? We're talking to someone with our music. We're literally having a conversation or we're telling a story. So you have to be aware of what you're saying on top of aware of you're putting this to music, which is hard for some, easy for others. But those are the two tips I would recommend. If you're not actively already writing something and something comes into your head and you want to kind of dish it out, think about it more, do an activity that doesn't require a lot of mental thought. Second tip is follow that creativity, that flow state as far as it can go. Try not to think too much about it. Try not to force it. Try not to extend it. These are skills that will kind of translate later on to a different presentation where I talk about the flow state itself. Not sure how far along that'll be. Put a little link in the description if I do have it, or all that stuff. It'll happen eventually. So that's kind of all the prelim stuff. Now we're going to start doing the recreation aspect. So traditionally, when I write music, I tend to write lyrics first and then do the instrumentation. This example is a bit of a 50-50. So I've been working on a song that follows the EAB chord progression for the verses. And when I started coming up with lyrics, I instantly realized I was following that same chord progression. I was like, I like where it is, but I don't want to follow something when I'm already writing another song in that key. So what I ended up doing was putting a capo on the first fret, transcribing the song over now into F. So we're still starting with that EAB. Progression. So that's where I was at musically. Now, since I was already kind of having that chord progression in the background, the lyrics started originally with putting pen to paper. That was the first thought I came up with. After I started having that and I started coming up with a little bit of a vocal melody, I ended up jumping in the shower and started turning my brain off so I could focus more on that flow. So that first line, putting pen to paper, that's kind of setting the scene, the narrative, where we're going and what are we doing with it, right? So what I was thinking of at the time was writing in a journal. So we're reminiscing. What else do you do when you're reminiscing? I was like, all right, putting pen to paper. Well, I'm obviously thinking about something that happened before. So this is at a different time. I was like, all right, let's follow that. Putting pen to paper, writing from a different place. Because I'm, mentally in a different place. On top of physically, I'm in a different place from the memories that I'm about to have. So, all right, that's our first line. Putting pen to paper, writing from a different place. How do we follow that up? What else do you tend to do when you're thinking about memories? I was like, photos, pictures. That's another thing. So I'm like, okay. The second line, looking through my pictures. I was like, okay, now what? Looking through my pictures of a better time in better days. Kind of follow the rhyme, place, days. You say it just right, it kind of rhymes a little bit, I'm not really one of those musicians who stipulates you have to rhyme, but I tend to rhyme some verses and not rhyme others just to kind of give them some definition when I'm singing and I'm doing stuff. That's another presentation that I'll go over and, more of like how to take your lyrics and like add depth basically. So we got the two lines, putting pen to paper, writing from a different place, looking through my pictures of better times and a better time and better days. Then the third and the fourth line kind of all flowed together pretty naturally. And it was putting pen to paper, writing from a different place, looking through my pictures of better time and better days. Who was there is irrelevant, but when it was, it all meant everything. And then right into that, it was, back then I had my innocence, but who I am stopped making sense. And I was like, okay, that's a good solid line. Now let's kind of put that with the music. I was still in the shower, so I was just having the music in my head. But to replicate it for here, we'll put it all together. A little bit of an intro for it. Putting pen to paper, writing from a different kind of place, looking through my pictures of a better time and better days. Who was there's irrelevant, but when it was, it all meant everything. Back then I had my innocence, but then who I was stopped making sense, and I was thinking that in my head. I didn't have a chord progression for it yet, but I was just like, I like kind of just going into some line that I sustain. So back then I had my innocence, but who I was stopped making sense. So what I ended up doing was basically a D inversion into an A, back into that E. And keep in mind, we're going to keep on the first fret here. So I was like, okay, we're still keeping that chord progression. So this is when I got out of the shower and I started playing guitar and making sure that the vocal melody synced up with the guitar chords that I had. So that was the melody I already had, and I was just making sure I was in the right key, the right pitch, and all that stuff. So we're kind of skipping a little bit, and now we're at me just playing guitar, singing. So after I came up with that, I was like, all right, let's kind of change up the next verse. I want to kind of sustain on a lyric. I want to make it seem like I'm not necessarily following the path I was already setting. We've set the scene, we've set the template, we have our kind of aspect to start branching off from. So I was like, all right, well, while we got these going, I'm crying, feel like dying when I think of lying about who I am. All that flowed together in one bunch. I already kind of knew. I was like, all right, I want to sustain, so we got to find something that I can keep using a rhyming lyric to sustain on. I'm crying, feel like dying when I think of lying about who I am. We don't need to continue that rhyme into the next part, but we do the following part after. So now I was like, okay, what do I come up with now? This is when I decided to go for a walk. So I'm walking. I had been in the shower for maybe like 20 minutes. So sometimes I'll transition into other things that don't require a lot of thought, but I wanted to specifically play guitar to make sure my vocal melody was lining up with the chord progression I had in my head. So I was like, all right, I don't want to jump back in the shower, but I want to work on some vocals. So I ended up going for a walk around my block, and thankfully I live pretty close to a nature preserve, so I was able to kind of go there and incorporate stuff. This was when I started recording myself on Snapchat and kind of going through everything that I'm talking to you about right now. So we're sort of recreating it. I have the guitar here to emphasize some of my points, and I'm sitting comfortably in my chair. So boom, we've got part of a second verse, and now we just need to keep that lyrical rhyme to sustain our vocal melody on. So reading it back, it's I'm crying, I feel like dying when I think of lying about who I am. I'm running low on time and I'm done trying to convince everybody who I am. Obviously not as strong, but I was like, okay, you know what? I like the first two. I like running low on time. And normally I'm not one of those artists who will kind of like force a rhyme, but I was like, you know what? I think in this sense it kind of works. Running low on time and I'm done trying. I felt that worked pretty well. The lyric after that, I'm still, even now, like we're back in the present, even now I'm not really sure what I want to do with. But I do like running low on time and I'm done trying to tell people who I am. And then the other day, I was finally able to start working on a chorus. So this whole song, we're going to go back to the past a little bit. This whole song started with that E-A-B chord progression, but it also had a riff that I decided was going to be a piano part. So it was simply... that piano riff is kind of going to be going in from time to time. So we kind of got that piano riff going. We got the chords going. We got the lyrics going. Now we just need to come up with a chorus. And that's when the flow state for me ended. I do have a chorus and I'll play it for you later. But taking all the experience, everything we just talked about, putting it back into what this presentation is about is creativity, fostering creativity, and where it goes. So we've got the two tips, right? We make sure we do something that doesn't require a lot of mental faculty when we're trying to come up with lyrics or any sort of compositional thing, but in this context, it's for songwriting. And the second thing is follow that flow and creative state as far as you can. Well, tying into that second thing, I ran out of gas. I had walked for about half a mile, finished up those lines, couldn't come up with a solid chorus, didn't even come up with a chorus progression until couple of days after from that point, and then I actually came up with lyrics for it about 2 days ago, and it's been stuck in my head ever since. So the reason why we don't tend to follow our flow states for very long periods of time when we're first starting out with our songwriting is simply because it's a muscle and a skill, and combining the two together, you got to work out before you can start lifting 400 or 500 pounds. You got to build yourself up to it. It's very rare you have someone who can naturally just lift these things with their own muscles, right? And then secondly, it's a skill, so we have to work on it. And that's why we need to follow the flow state as it happens as far as we possibly can. Now, where you get your inspiration from, it could be from a variety of things. I know musicians who can literally think of a topic, choose that topic, start coming up with something, then they have a song. Sometimes it happens all in one go. Sometimes it takes months, years before they finish it off. But that's a thing that happens, right? You shouldn't ever feel ashamed to come up with a good idea, only get maybe a verse, a chorus, maybe even just the chords down, and then kind of put it on the shelf and not think about it for months, years. Haven't met any artists yet who've had a song for over a decade they've not finished. So I guess there's some good luck there, right? Or good news there. If you have something, you'll finish it within a decade, right? That's never what you want to hear. But when you're thinking about things from a songwriting standpoint, it's really just, remember, it's poetry and it's a story on top of being music, right? So where do people get their story ideas from? Where do people get their influences to make a poem? You know, all of those things are open. I tend to listen to a lot of different genres now and not necessarily emulate, but incorporate elements, right? Almost like I'm stealing. I'm not stealing lyrics, but I maybe steal an idea or I steal a sound. All right, not a chord progression per se, just a sound. Sometimes there's a genre of music I'll dip my toe into just because I really like a sound. In this case, that piano riff that kind of catapulted everything, I didn't hear that from anything before, but then I realized there was a pop song I heard. I'm pretty sure it's a Taylor Swift song that has something like that, right? But I don't really listen to Taylor Swift. I do listen to John Mayer, and John Mayer does use that chord progression in a handful of songs. So the chord progression, maybe I'm getting the influence from, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm stealing because I don't think there's a John Mayer song that kind of sounds like that. Could be wrong. But we shouldn't feel ashamed to incorporate other musicians' elements. We should do our best not to take lyrical lines, take guitar riff or piano riffs verbatim. Chord progressions, I mean, look at it from an alphabetical standpoint, right? We have A through G. We got 7. We got 7 different notes that we can go from. If we incorporate majors, minors, flats, and sharps, we got a little bit more variety on things. But sorry, almost every chord progression has been done. And like, you're not going to come up with anything new. So that does happen. Don't feel limited by that, especially when you're first starting off. A lot of musicians will think that the music that they're writing is copy pasta of an artist they're currently listening to or they're heavily influenced to. That's kind of how it just works, you know. There are musicians today who still feel they're writing other musicians' work and hoping it's either as good or, you know, they put just enough of their own creativity into it that it sounds like something different, right? That's kind of what the creative process is for me. And hopefully I kind of showed you guys a little bit of kind of how that goes. Like I said, I really wish I could have just incorporated what I did with my Snapchat, uploaded here. Can't do it. Didn't know Snapchat doesn't save some of your stuff. So I tried to recreate it a little bit for you guys here. So that being said, I will do the chorus of the song as well. We're going to put everything together and kind of just show you what that creative process led to. And then after I do the song, I'll quickly recap where my creative process went to, touch on the tips again, and then hopefully you guys can use that. So let's put it all together here. Pardon my crappy guitar playing. I haven't cut my nails in a while. Putting pen to paper, writing from a different place, looking through my pictures of a better time and better days. Who was there's irrelevant, but when it was it all and everything. Back then I had my innocence, but then who I was stopped making sense, and I'm crying, feel like dying when I think of lying about who I am. I'm running low on time, but I'm done trying to convince you all I'm not the same. Ooh, I just keep putting in the words, no. And then I messed around and I found out that lately I've just been sitting right here the whole time. That's all I've got so far. So, working my way up, started with the piano riff. That riff was kind of going on in my head. Then I found that it was in chord progression of E, A, B. Put a capo on first fret because I was already writing a song in E, A, and B using that progression. So now we have a capo on the first fret. So now we're in F, but we're still E, A, B progression. Coming up with the lyrics, putting pen to paper, having all that narrative stuff flow. Figured that out in the shower, came out, started putting the chords to the vocals, took a walk, came up with that second verse line. Then how I came up with the chorus was I really liked doing that. It's an inversion. Oh, come on, if I can put my capo back on real quick. So you got 5th fret on A and D, and then you got 3rd fret on G, and then it's an open. I really like that. I like that sound going into an A. So I'm like, all right, I definitely want to use that again. And I'm like, well, what's a natural thing from there? Well, that's a C minor, or I'm sorry, a C sharp, C flat shape. But since we have a capo on, now we're in D. So we have a D into another D inversion, to an A, to an E, B, back into the D. I just really love that flow. Because we're still kind of keeping our D as the root. And then we're just wrapping it up together with an A, B, back into the progression. And the chorus, I realized when I was messing with it, I really wanted to do. So I'm like, all right, anything I come up with from there is good. I just really want to have that. Not sure how to feel about it. And then I ended up coming up with the title of the song. Maybe it's all in my mind. Maybe I'm just sitting here the whole time. Obviously a very long title, probably not going to be the one I keep, but that is going to be the main lyric of the song. You know, it's just, maybe I've just been kind of sitting here wasting all this time. Maybe everything is just made up in my mind. You know, that's kind of like the thought process here. So that's just a little bit of a recreation of my creative process. This is some tips to give you guys how to start viewing the songwriting process, and it comes down with that creativity, how you get your creativity working through, how you do your creative process and to an end product. Obviously, we didn't finish the song. We just came up with a chorus the other day, so who knows? Maybe I'll be able to make another video to follow up where I'm even at the time as I'm coming up with the lyrics and, you know, potentially finishing off a chord progression. We'll kind of see how the creative process goes in from there. If not, the second presentation is probably going to be more of how to achieve that flow state more often and kind of what flow state is. So this time around, we just covered a little bit of creativity, how to foster creativity, how to ride out our creativity, and then we'll talk more about the flow state, the following one, where it just goes more into detail as to, like, you know what the flow state is, right? You know, if you're playing video games, it's when you're doing really good and you're not thinking about it. You're just doing it, right? Same thing with athletes and sports. Same thing with songwriting, compositional. Imagine when you're doing a solo on stage live and you're just like very aware of everything that's going on, but it's not affecting you. You're just harnessing it to get into like that higher plane of playing. That's exactly what flow state is, and we can achieve that with our songwriting as well. So, thank you very much for the time. Like I said, I'm sorry this was supposed to be a Facebook. I'm used to doing Facebook Lives. This was supposed to be a YouTube Live, but I can't do it through my mobile, so we'll just treat this as one. Any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them down there. I'll try and tackle them the next presentation and or the follow-up to this one where I'm going through me completing the rest of the song, just so you guys have a reference of like, okay, this is what the songwriting process is for a person. Now, how does that compare to your guys's? Let me know what your creative process is, and maybe I can incorporate some tips and tricks that you have into the following presentation to help out other struggling artists. So, thank you very much. Take care.